So, hi and welcome everyone to the Perimenopause and Menopause Club. We are so lucky to be speaking again today with Sheela Zelmer, who is a leading, she is, a pelvic floor or pelvic health physiotherapist and women's health coach. And Sheela is going to be talking to us today all about sex and intimacy in perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I see so many questions on this topic in my group and in many of the other perimenopause and menopause groups that I'm in. It really does feel like it's a minefield and that there's very little helpful information for people besides doing kegels, using lube, and I don't know. I don't even know what else is thrown at people's advice. So school us, tell us what is going on and why, and what your real recommendations are.
Amazing. So thank you so much for having me back, because I think it's really great when, as women, we have good health information, right? I think a lot of us in this demographic, perimenopause, menopause beyond, maybe we didn't talk to our mothers about this. There certainly wasn't the kind of sex ed that, is now available in school. So we just don't have great info. We didn't grow up with the internet and things like that. So I'm so excited to chat with your group. So I'm just going to jump right in. So Tracy, thanks so much for having me. My name is Sheela Zelmer, and as Tracy mentioned, I am a pelvic physiotherapist. I am a health coach and sex therapist. So what does all that mean? It means that I work with women when they are experiencing struggles from anything that's below the waist. So that could be to do with their bladder, the vagina, sex and intimacy, bowel, etc. But my passion project really is sex and intimacy, for women to experience pleasure, to have libido and desire, and to enjoy their sex life. But the stats are not so great. 1 in 4 women experience struggles with sex and intimacy. And that can look like different things over the course of our life. But as we approach those perimenopause years, go into menopause, and then that time beyond menopause, post-menopause, we can experience lots of different things. It could be pain with penetration, pain with stimulation, dryness, tightness. Maybe it feels like things are going to rip. There might even be some bleeding. I've had women explain to me that they feel that they can't have any kind of penetration, or that their partner won't fit, that they're hitting something. They have difficulties achieving an orgasm, or maybe they can't even get there. And a lot of times, a lack of sensations, things just don't feel the same. But the challenge is, when things don't feel good, we are less likely to want to be intimate, right? And I think that makes sense. We can all kind of understand that if I'm not enjoying it, how likely am I to want to be intimate the next time? If it is actually painful, then I'm more likely to tense up in anticipation of it the next time. I'm certainly not going to become aroused. I'm certainly not going to enjoy myself. And that really zaps my libido. And so a lot of times women begin by experiencing some physical concerns, but then it starts to become a libido issue. And the two are so intricately connected. And what that means is that sometimes we end up faking it. Maybe if we can't achieve orgasm, that we'll fake it, or we grin and bear it. It's not pleasant. It's not comfortable. We just want to get it over with. But overall, we end up then not enjoying the process. And not only does that impact our relationships, but really it impacts our health, our enjoyment, our pleasure, our body's natural functions and natural systems. So I think it's really natural that we try a bunch of different things. And many women have tried various different things when they start to experience struggles. And Tracy, you kind of mentioned some of these things. So we try kegels, right? We try squeezing the pelvic floor muscles. Maybe we Google what to do when we find some ways to strengthen these muscles. Maybe we buy a gadget that's got a Bluetooth device to your phone that maybe looks like a video game or something, to be able to strengthen these muscles, because we think, well, maybe we're just weak in the vagina. Maybe we think about, okay, I need hormones, so I need to go to my doctor and get hormone creams or hormone supplementation. Maybe I'm going to try different kinds of lubricants because it's so dry. Just, adding the right kind of lube might make things feel better. Or maybe I even go to something like erotica or porn. people start watching things like Bridgerton and other shows, different movies to kind of kickstart things. But the challenge is these issues, these solutions, even something like erotica, all it does is kickstart the process or make it a action-based. It does not change our libido. It doesn't make us want to have sex. It doesn't make us desire that kind of intimacy. So that's really what I want to talk about today, because I think that's where a lot of women struggle, because they are trying different solutions, but still not getting the result that they like. They don't enjoy the whole act of intimacy. They're not feeling good, and they are not wanting to be intimate. So first of all, I want to also say that we're talking as a group here to women, but this is not a women's only problem. Men also experience a loss of libido as they get older. They don't have reliable erections, they don't get as hard. And so they too may at the same phase of life be experiencing issues. So when you put the two of them together, it can be quite complex. But I want to stress that if you are personally experiencing the issues I'm talking about today, I want us to talk about it. This is a great forum in Tracy's group. There's lots of great information and resources, and I'm hoping you'll learn something today too. It's impossible to cover everything in our half an hour or so chat. So this is really the Coles Notes version. Now, the challenges with sex and intimacy, like I was saying, 25%, that's 1 in 4 women will struggle in this area, but less than 8% of women are actually saying anything to our doctor. That could be because we're embarrassed about it. I mean, currently where we are in Ontario, it's hard to get an appointment with your doctor. They're only seeing you virtually. It might not be the kind of thing that you're going to bring up in an appointment. And the other interesting piece is only around 10% of physicians ask or even have suggestions about what you can do. There was a recent study that was done that showed that family physicians feel ill prepared to address sex and intimacy concerns beyond a prescription for something like hormones. And the challenge is, if you've got 25% or more of women struggling, but less than 8% are actually seeking out treatment, that's a huge disconnect. And that's the challenge. It keeps us stuck, right? So we stay stuck with intimacy that doesn't feel good. We stay stuck with a low libido. And when we address things and these struggles, we always think about the physical aspect, but the challenge is sex isn't just physical, right? It's emotional and relational too. And what do I mean by that? So when I talk about the physical aspects of sex and intimacy, that is like the dryness, the way the muscles function, the ability to orgasm. But you cannot have those aspects without the emotional and relational piece. So that emotional aspect, when I talk about that specifically, that's how you feel, right? Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel desired? Do you feel appreciated? Or are you feeling overworked, stressed, exhausted, right? Because if you're working from home, you're managing the house, managing the kids, and you are just spent by the end of the day, it's understandable how you're going to be less receptive to the nudge, nudge, wink, wink of your partner when you are feeling depleted already. That's not a physical thing, that's an emotional thing. And then if you put vaginal dryness or tightness on top of that, that makes it even worse. And so some of these issues of being overtired, not getting a good enough sleep from a health perspective, not managing physical activity and feeling physically good in our body, that has that impact on that aspect. So it's not as simple as just saying, I'm going to do these exercises, I'm going to buy a lube, and I'm going to go on hormone replacement therapy, because I have a lot of women that do that and they say, but I still have no libido, right? It's because libido is the wanting to have sex, that desire to have sex. That has to come from other aspects of our life too. If we think about, if I'm annoyed or exhausted because of all the things that I've got to do today, as well as I'm thinking about tomorrow, and my partner, gives me the, nice roll of the shoulder and the nudge and the little wink with the eyes, I'm probably going to feel annoyed or maybe even angry. I'm going to feel not seen. And so that's part of it too, recognizing that emotional aspect has got to be addressed. And this can be, how do we communicate with our partner? How do we recognize what needs to happen for me to be more relaxed so that I can enjoy? Because more lube is not going to fix that, right? More hormones is not going to fix that. when we haven't taken care of ourselves, our self-care, right? Sleep, exercise, nutrition, stress management, it's really hard to emotionally be in a good place. And when I talk about that relational aspect, I mean the relationship with your partner, but more so I mean how you as an individual relate to your partner. Do you feel sexy? Would you call yourself sexy? Do you feel sensual? And let me tell you, so many of my clients struggle with this part, like actually calling themselves sexy because they just don't feel it. And that again goes back to, okay, more kegels, more lube, a gadget is not going to address that area. That is a mindset issue. How do I get back to embracing the changes in my body, the changes in my life, and where I'm at, and feel confident and strong? And this is where things like exercise, mindfulness, sleep, that all comes in there. So anyways, is this a lot of information, Tracy? How are we doing here?
No, it's
yeah.
it's great. It's great.
Yes.
Keep going.
Okay, so it's more than just Kegels, but it's also not as simple as get a good night's sleep and make sure that you exercise. Because on the other end, I have clients that come to see me that say, I do mindfulness and meditation on a consistent basis. I'm moving my body regularly. I'm prioritizing sleep. I'm very aware of what I eat, and yet I still have no libido. Like, this is why it's not one or the other, it's all of it, right? It's physical, emotional, and relational. And we need to do that work to get some of those aspects under control. So what are we going to do about it as women? And where I always encourage women to start with is the physical part of it. Start at the beginning. The physical aspect is important. I don't want to dismiss it, but remember, it's not the only component. But sometimes it's easier to start here, right? We can have a plan of exercises. We can have a plan of nutrition. Maybe we have blood work and we need supplementation or medication that goes with it. So I always recommend that we begin with the physical aspect, get that under control. So the physical aspect, I like to begin with the pelvic floor. Is there strength and relaxation of the pelvic floor muscles? And if you don't know, or you're not quite sure, this is where you need to see a pelvic physio. Like, you need to determine if your pelvic physio is strong or weak, tense or relaxed. You are not going to have good arousal and orgasm without both sides of that equation. It's not all strengthening. It also has, you have to have relaxation. Relaxation allows any kind of penetration, good blood flow, engorgement of the clitoris, but we need good strength to maintain that arousal so we can orgasm. It's both of them.
Can I
And
ask
this
a
is
question around that?
Yeah.
So can you give some idea of what percentage of kind of general women in our age group that you see have, because I don't think people understand that what's going on with the loose and the tight. I know I certainly didn't have any clue until I specialized in movement for the pelvic floor. We all have, I mean, anecdotally, right, this idea that if there's a pelvic floor issue, it's because we're too loose, and therefore we need to strength, and strength equals Kegels, right? I think that is like the dominant view or understanding out there, and what all these gadgets and even what doctors say, pelvic floor issues equals Kegels, which is strengthening. So maybe if you can explain just a little bit around that.
No, that's a great point, because for sure, I think the dominant message is that any kind of issue, whether it is sexual, bladder leakage, anything, prolapse, is because I'm too loose. And so I want to say that we can have weakness on two ends of a continuum. So if we think of muscles on a continuum, at one end of the continuum, I can have weakness, meaning I leak pee, maybe I can't squeeze around my partner, all of these things, because things are very loose and open down below, right? My vagina is a little bit more stretched out, etc.
We had a technical issue. So let's start again. We got up to talking about between pelvic floors that are too tight and pelvic floors that are too loose.
Yes.
Is it true that most of us are actually too tight and not too loose?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Great. Yes, we will start here. Okay. So when we think about any kind of issue in the pelvic floor, if we think about whether it is bladder leakage, prolapse, or challenges with sex and intimacy, a lot of us default to thinking that we are weak. Now, weak can exist on a continuum. if we think about weakness here, I can be weak because my muscles are too loosey-goosey, but I can also be weak because my muscles are too tense and tight. If I give you the example of my neck and shoulders here, if my shoulders are up by my ears, those muscles are all tense like this. And I'm not going to be able to lift really well or move really well, not because I am loose, but because I am too tight and therefore weak. And so by far, I'm going to say at least 70% of the women that come to see me have too much tightness. They are too tense. There's over activation of these muscles, and doing more kegels, using that gadget with the Bluetooth to your phone, is going to make things worse. And so if we're not sure which end of the spectrum we fall into, you really do need to see somebody to get that evaluated. Don't just assume that if you're experiencing a challenge that it is due to weakness that requires squeezing. You may need to do the squeezing and the relaxing. So I'll give you an example of my biceps here. So if I want to strengthen my biceps, I don't do weights like this. I have to let it go and strengthen, let it go and strengthen. Without the let go, the strengthen's not going to happen. And that's the same with our pelvic floor. So defaulting to thinking that I need to address the physical component by doing more kegels isn't always the way. We need strength, but without that relaxation, we're not going to experience good intimacy at all. And this goes for bladder control and prolapse as well. So it's for all of these areas when we're talking about the way that these muscles function, for sure. So in addition to that strength and relaxation, we want to make sure, again, see a pelvic physio. If you are not sure what your muscles are like, you need to see someone that's going to be able to evaluate and tell you which end of the spectrum you're on. And it's not an issue that is just a mom's issue. This is a women's health issue, not a mom's issue. So even if you have not had children, we can still be experiencing challenges in this area. Now, we also need to address the physical aspect of the health of the vulva and the vagina. Everyone over the age of 40 really should be moisturizing their vagina. And I don't mean lubricant, right? So lube is for slide and glide with sex and intimacy, but a moisturizer is like skincare, right? Like for our face, our hands, it keeps it youthful and supple. And we need this for the vagina as well. Now, some of us may feel wet down there, but perspiration, discharge, leakage are not moisture, right? We need moisturizers. There are a lot on the market, and you get what you pay for, right? You can buy inexpensive ones. I've even seen some at the dollar store, all the way up to, custom compounded things from pharmacies. But really, we need to make sure that we're looking at that aspect of our health, because it's not as simple as just using a lube. We need to keep that tissue moisturized and healthy all the time. And then, like I said, we need to zoom out and address the other aspects that affect how our body feels. Because if those other areas are not optimal, we're not going to have great intimacy. That's nutrition, sleep, stress, our mood, and movement. And there's tons of great resources. I mean, Tracy, your group is fantastic for all of this, all of the great content that you put out there to encourage women to look holistically at their health, because we cannot ignore it, right? It's not as simple as saying, I'm just going to take these supplements that I heard are supposed to be good after menopause. It's not as simple as that, right? We can't have good pelvic health, hormone health, brain health, any of these things without addressing it from a very, very holistic standpoint. And, perhaps you require some blood work or other tests, whether that is for thyroid, blood sugar, sex hormones, things like that. It's not always necessary, but that may be part of the picture. Using the resources, the health resources that are around, to put together a full picture to understand. But I want to say, if you're not moving, if you're not sleeping well, if you know that your nutrition is not great, those pieces need to be addressed as well in order to really have a great sex life there. And then once you've got that physical aspect, asking yourself, what does it take to get you into the mood, right? And if you are one of the many women I see that say vacation sex is a thing, right? And I know we're not going on vacations anywhere in the near future necessarily. I want to ask you, why is it that you're in the mood on vacation and not at home? And we need to ask ourselves those questions, because sometimes the day-to-day of life is the very thing that's zapping our libido. Now we can't, jet off all of a sudden, but how can we make some changes? Ask for help, utilize resources, share the load within our home so that we can prioritize our own self-care and then be relaxed to enjoy that intimacy, because it's the intimacy that leads to the sex, right? We want both of them coming together. We don't want to say, well, I can't have either of them because the sex is no good, right? We want both of them to be a factor. And so I understand for a lot of women, sometimes this is too big of a topic really to talk about, right? And I don't want to oversimplify it as simply saying, have some help around the house and you'll all of a sudden be in the mood. But again, we need to recognize that if there's a disconnect at times in our desire cycles, we need to understand why that is and do some work there. And again, this is the work that I do with women to really help them understand that, to help them identify what feels good, put together the physical pieces, kickstart their desire, etc. So I don't know if that sounds good, Tracy. Like I tried to sort of do a bit of a coverage over everything. Is there anything that has come up in the chat or any questions people have been asking in particular?
There are a few questions that I've had sent to me. The first is people want to know the difference between moisturizer and lube.
Okay.
And if one is better than the other.
Okay, so they are two different purposes. I like to use this example. So if my lips are dry on my mouth here, I could lick them with my tongue and they would be moistened. And they would be moistened to allow me to talk without feeling like they're pulling, but I haven't really moisturized them. But if I use a moisturizing lip balm, the lipstick I have has some moisturizer in it, that's going to go further for really softening and keeping those lips moist. I'll use another example. If I want to eat popcorn at the movies and my lips are quite dry, I'm going to keep licking them, but that's not really going to help with that salty popcorn. It's going to be an irritant, right? So a lubricant is like the licking, right? It is just a purpose-specific slide and glide that you use for intimate activities. Some women also need to use a lubricant to insert a tampon or things like that if they've got a lot of dryness, but it is very purpose-specific and incident-specific. A moisturizer is more like the lip balm. It's part of my skincare routine. It's part of my self-care. And a moisturizer can be purchased now. Some drugstores carry them either in the aisle where you will find things like condoms, etc. Sometimes they're behind the pharmacist counter. There are products that are available at health food stores, online, things like that. Read your ingredients. The more natural and basic things are, the better. There's a product I really like that's made in BC and it's custom compounded there, but it's more expensive. But that's something I want to spend the money on and I feel that it's very helpful. But there are other products that are less expensive that you can buy at the drugstore. So there's a huge continuum there, and really women need to try different things. But the moisturizer is used consistently to promote good tissue health. And again, even if you're not sexually active, so if you don't have a partner, but you want to be able to have a pap test, have an internal exam, if we need to maintain that suppleness and softness of the tissue, it needs to be moisturized. So that's the difference there. I don't know if that's clear, moisturizer versus lube in that sense. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, thank you. No, that's great. Another question that I had is, sorry, let me just read it to you. What is vaginal atrophy and why is it an issue?
So atrophy means, it sounds terrible. Atrophy literally means a wasting away. So we can have atrophy of our muscles, say, for example, if we're on prolonged bed rest, we lose some of that muscle. The vagina itself has some bulk to it. Some of that, and when I say bulk, I mean like a squishiness. Like if we think of like there's a firmness, a plumpness to the vaginal walls. Some of that is muscle. Some of that is tissue firmness. There's like a bulk to the tissues. Like when we're younger, the skin on our arms, everything is just more plump and resilient. And so vaginal atrophy is a hormonal change that results in the vagina thinning and not having that bulk. Often it can result in things like tearing or bleeding and pain and burning with any kind of penetration. So women will come to me and say that sex is very painful. They may even have little fissures or little cuts that happen when they have sex with bleeding and pain. They can also have atrophy that will lead to things like recurrent bladder infections, etc. It's a loss of integrity and volume to that vaginal space. Now, it's a hormonal change that happens to some women, many women in the perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopausal stages. So a vaginal moisturizer can help minimize it earlier. So for example, a woman in her 40s that is still having her period, using a moisturizer regularly is going to help hopefully prevent some of that thinning. But after menopause, I'm not sure how much, like the research doesn't say that we're going to turn the clock back on that. This is where sometimes hormone therapy, hormone creams inserted into the vagina will help build that up, along with exercises, along with good tissue health, nutrition, all of those things we've already talked about. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, really, really good to know. And I love that you mentioned that this is something that we should be doing in perimenopause as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure.
From what I understand, you're saying it's progressive, right? If you don't do something about it when you start feeling symptoms, I assume it's just going to get worse.
And I even think we need to do something before we start feeling symptoms, because when you start feeling symptoms, you've already have changes. So let me use the example of my eyes. If I never used a facial moisturizer, if I never put eye cream, I never use hand cream, I can't decide in my mid 50s that I don't like these wrinkles. I'm going to go to Sephora and spend $150 and expect it to reverse anything. Like, it's not going to. So we're in a preservation mode. I know that sounds so dire, but in our 40s, that's when we're really talking about preserving our vaginal health, bone health, brain health, all of these good things, because we will lose that. This is definitely something that does not improve with age. It doesn't go away on its own. So you do need to be staying ahead of it for sure.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks so much for that. And then the last question I have here is about bladder leaking.
Okay. Yes.
Somebody wants to know what advice you have about that and what's causing it.
So bladder leakage can be for a lot of different reasons, but the two main common ones are stress incontinence, not mental stress, but when there is a stress on the body, coughing, sneezing, laughing, jumping, the force that's coming onto the bladder is greater than what the muscles can generate to hold it shut. And so the net result is there's leakage that comes out of that. That can be something that worsens as we get older if we have atrophy. So if we have a loss of that muscle, due to hormonal changes, there's not as much muscle to close things off, so we can have leakage. But you can also have leakage due to urgency. So there can be urge incontinence, meaning that I say, for example, I'm sitting in the car, I pull into the garage, I get out of the car, I open the door into my house, and suddenly I'm hit with such a strong sense that I have to void. I can't even get my shoes off quickly. I'm running to the toilet, right? That kind of urgency is not related to the muscles not squeezing. It's actually related to too much tension, like we were talking about before. My muscles are too tight. They're already scrunched up as much as possible. And when I need them, they're fatigued. They're already at the end of their capacity and they can't do their job properly. So both of them have different treatments. Now, there's also mixed incontinence, a little bit of both, right? We always emphasize relaxation of the muscles, and from relaxation, build strength. So kegels are not necessarily always a solution. And if you've tried them in the past and it hasn't worked, definitely go the other way. Focus on relaxation, yoga, lengthening, opening the hips, opening the pelvis, lots of movement, breathing, all of these great things to get the pelvic floor to relax a little bit. And then from there, from a position of relaxation, strengthen. So again, if my neck and shoulders are hunched up like this all the time, I'm not going to go to the gym and start doing shrugs and start lifting weights. I have to focus on dropping my shoulders so that I can move better. It's the same with our pelvic floor.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you tell us a bit about how people can work with you and what you offer?
Yeah, so I am happy to, for sure, answer any questions if people have specific questions. Sometimes there might be a personal question and things like that. So like I said, I'm a pelvic physio and I also do sex therapy. So I like to help women really uncover from a holistic standpoint why sex and intimacy is not working for them, so that it's combined with physio. And so it's sometimes covered by your benefits. It kind of depends. So you can reach me. I've got my website. I can give that to you, Tracy, and you can certainly put that in there. But I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram. And I think that's probably the easiest way to connect with me and message me. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today about this very important topic.
This is great. Thank you.
Lots and lots of nuggets of information that I hope people will explore, right? And
absolutely,
the solutions are possible, but maybe not what you think they are.
Absolutely. And
it's a combination, right?
This is it.
No
we need to think big picture. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Amazing.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll
this was
chat
great.
again soon.
For sure.